couple of years before I reached retirement eligibility, the Director for Institutional Services retired, and a Senior Finance Administrator, Bill Pasalacqua, assumed his duties. Soon after that, his assistant, Valerie Bartlett, claimed to have received a complaint from a doctor's office saying that I had said something very offensive to her patient. I denied having said anything offensive, but I was told that I had been identified by name and I should admit to it and accept the consequences. Also, I was specifically forbidden from making any effort to contact the doctor or even find out her name. Several months after my case had been dismissed from court for lack of evidence, I decided the restriction was no longer valid, so I wrote to the doctor, and I asked her what her complaint was about. Her written response was that, and yes, I am intentionally covering the doctor's name to protect her privacy. Anyhow, her written response was that she had not filed any complaint against me, and further, she wrote that she had no knowledge of any complaint. Yet in one official document from the university, document number CHA 157, Valerie Bartlett was quoted as having stated that she had spoken directly with the doctor. At this point, I suddenly realized I had been intentionally set up for firing. Initially, I had thought I was dealing with some honest misunderstandings, the type of misunderstandings we all have to deal with when one person says something, another person misunderstands what was said, and the whole thing just snowballs out of proportion. As I carefully reviewed the evidence, I found a disturbing pattern of fabrications of allegations and corruption of evidence. Additionally, almost all of the allegations had been kept secret from me in direct violation of university policy. This brings us to one of the points I promised to share with you. If you find yourself in a similar situation of being fired for reasons that just don't seem to make sense, write a letter to the Human Resources Department asking for clarification. They are the staff agency that has responsibility for such matters. Request a complete listing of all allegations and findings against you, as well as identification of the specific rule, regulation, or policy you are accused of having violated. If I had done this, I would have had more time to review evidence before filing my lawsuit, and I would have had the exact policy to follow. As it was, because I didn't even know about most of the allegations, I was basically fighting a battle while blindfolded. Also, my attorney and I were both told one reason for my firing, yet the university presented a completely different reason in court. There was very important evidence that was not even addressed in testimony because we had been sent looking in the wrong direction. Read between the lines here. Get this information in writing any way you can. Doesn't have to be by a formal letter. It can be by an email. Anything that can be printed out and presented in court as evidence. As one example of the corruption of evidence, one allegation that had been kept completely secret from me was that supposedly a medical student had complained to one of the deans that I was always waiting outside her home to walk her to work in the morning and changing my schedule to walk her home in the evening. No one has been able to identify this alleged student by name, so she could never be questioned about the validity of the allegation. Additionally, Valerie Bartlett was quoted in one official university document as having indicated that she had no personal knowledge of the complaint, but supposedly the dean had talked to John Davidson, one of my supervisors, who then talked to me about it. Yet in their sworn testimony, on page 49 of his testimony, John Davidson said, and on page 12 of his testimony, the dean said that they had no knowledge or recollection of any such allegation. John Davidson mentioned later in his testimony that he remembered that the dean had spoken to him about something that was so inconsequential he couldn't even remember what it was. I do remember, though, what it was John Davidson told me. He said that a medical student had told the dean that she thought I had somehow been too friendly or too familiar with her on one occasion, and it somehow involved her dog, but John didn't know any more about it than that. John added that this was strictly for my information and nothing to be concerned about. It took me a while to figure out what he was referring to. Then I remembered. A few days before, I had been eating lunch at work, and I overheard a medical student very close by telling someone that she needed someone to watch her dog while she was out of town, and she mentioned the street she lived on. I excused myself for interrupting and said that one of my daughters lived on the same street, and she might be able to help if the medical student still needed someone. Let me tell you, there is a huge difference between, on the one hand, an offer of assistance extended in the workplace on one occasion, and on the other hand, an allegation of always waiting outside someone's house to walk her to work and changing your schedule to walk her home. And I can assure you I can't remember a single instance in the entire 20 years I worked at the university when I ever walked a female medical student to work. Yet this allegation is typical of what I have found in all of the allegations against me. My supervisor started with some inconsequential item and distorted and inflated it to the point that it did not begin to resemble what anyone had said or reported. Yet the story was presented to the court as verified fact. In my experience, whenever someone reports something or tries to quote someone, there will almost always be some inaccuracies. This is just human nature. But when every allegation turns out to be a flagrant exaggeration of the facts, this is not mere human inaccuracy. This clearly indicates intentional and premeditated corruption of evidence. And when tracing where these corrupted allegations originated, almost every one of them ends up starting with Bill Postlakwan's own assistant, Valerie Bartlett. One term that describes what my supervisors have done is called character assassination. By dreaming up so many allegations, and by ensuring that each one of the allegations described behavior that would have been positively disgusting and perverted if it had actually taken place, my supervisors ensured that the court or anyone else who heard the allegations would be thinking, this person must be so far out of control and so far out of touch with reality, it's no wonder they fired him. Yet the ones who were out of control and out of touch with reality were clearly the ones who fabricated the allegations and corrupted the evidence. Based on the evidence available to me, I cannot say for certain whether the administrators who heard my formal grievance decided to keep the allegations secret from me and take a shortcut in the process because they actually believed the character assassination or because they supported the actions of my supervisors. There are a few factors that lead me to believe it's because they supported the actions. If, on the other hand, it's because they actually believe the character assassinations, then my case serves as an excellent example of why shortcuts should not be taken regardless of how compelling the stories may sound. Each organization builds in safeguards along with checks and balances for each process. However, when someone decides to turn off the safeguards along with the checks and balances, sometimes you end up with a situation like mine. The result is a mess that takes years to unravel and clear up. Instead of being a shortcut, it becomes the longest possible distance between 2 points.